paid to do this. So we're going to get started.
Yeah.
Have to give the money back. I
Very
don't.
responsible. Thank you, Laura.
Okay, this is the last in a series of 3 on power struggles. And by popular demand, I'm going to talk about perfectionism today. A couple, yes. A couple of people ask for that. It's power struggle you have with yourself. This is why we're going to talk about perfection. I'll start off talking about that. So let's start with a prayer. Father, thank you for this time and place. I pray, Lord, that you would open our minds and our hearts so that we could learn how to be more loving to ourselves and others, and that we would honor Jesus this day. In his name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I do want to make a little bit of a correction. Is it not on? Okay. Is it? Can you hear me?
No.
Okay. Last week we talked about marriage, one of the greatest sources of power struggles. And someone came up to me afterwards and said, well, you know, why do we talk so much about marriage? I mean, is that something everybody's supposed to do? Is that like should I feel bad if I'm not married? And really, it's not really a Christian value like it is in other religions that you get married and have children. It isn't. In other religions, it is. Jewish religion, it is. It's your moral obligation to get married and have children. Muslims, same thing. It's not in Christianity. In fact, you remember what Paul said. Now, to the unmarried and the widows, I say, it's good for them to stay unmarried, as I do. If they cannot control themselves, they should marry, for it's better to marry than this. That's not really an endorsement, is it? Well, if you just can't control yourself, all right, you should get married. So, in the Catholic Church, which you know, and in order for you to be a professional Christian in the Catholic Church, you can't get married, right? So it isn't necessarily make you a better person in the eyes of Christianity to be married. I just want to say that. So it's important because I know a lot of people who are widows, as Paul said, or they choose to stay unmarried, as Paul did himself. And I believe there is certainly no impediment to the quality of your life or your spirituality, certainly, by being unmarried. And also the definition of marriage has changed radically just in the last, when I started in graduate school, let's take homosexuality, it was in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual as psychopathology, right? No psychologist believes that today. In no psychological organization holds that belief today. So we've changed. We now have same-sex marriages in every state in the country, and we now have a lot of literature on that, and the children being raised in those environments are just as healthy as the children raised in heterosexual marriages. So it's different. And single parents now, we have a lot of research on that. It's usually moms raising, although there are some single dads out there doing it, end up raising kids that are just as healthy. So it's not like it used to be. So when we talk about these principles, and I talk about marriage, it's mainly because most people either are or have been married, so they've got some experience with it. But it doesn't mean that you have to be or even should be from a Christian perspective. I just wanted to clear that up because I think the principles of healthy relationships apply to communities and friendships and churches and how you relate to each other. So we have power struggles with our friends, our parents, yes, in churches too, you have power struggles. And so we need to apply those principles there too, right? So I just wanted to do that disclaimer because I think important to help us all realize that we've all got work to do wherever you are in relating in healthy ways to each other. And psychology is a social science. So what that means, it's based on society. So as society changes, psychology changes. So what we used to think was healthy, now we think, well, okay, that wasn't right. So society's changed. So my science changes, which is very frustrating and confusing for me. I keep apologizing for psychologists. What we used to believe, we don't believe that anymore, sorry. But we're self-reflective, we're growing as a discipline. Freud got us started, and almost no one practices the way Freud did. So he was wrong about a whole bunch of stuff, but he got us started. So what we like to say in psychology is we hold our theories lightly, which means that this is what I believe, but it could be wrong. But this is what I believe now. We sort of go forward with that humility. So even what I'm saying today, I could be wrong, but it's just based on my experience. I'm going to share these thoughts with you. So let's talk about perfectionism. It's the psychological problem that falls through the cracks when dealing with kids, and it's obvious why, right? Because the kid who's a perfectionist doesn't cause problems for anyone else. They only cause problems for themselves. So there are children that have a serious problem with perfectionism that no one ever thinks anything negative about. As parents, and matter of fact, for a kid who struggles with perfectionism, we think, well, that's probably going to be the next president. That's a good thing that they're a perfectionist, or the kid is struggling with these internal battles with themselves. I know a 10-year-old girl who spends hours to complete her homework, and she even feels compelled to do all the extra credit, even if she's getting an A in the class, she has to do the extra credit too. She changes her outfit several times a day before going out. She'll completely change, and then before she goes out, that's not right, I got to do it over, and until she gets the outfit right. Adults think, yeah, she's going to be the next president. But she has tension in her relationships with her peers. She tends to be bossy and unforgiving. And despite all the extra time and energy she spends on everything, it never really makes her happy. She's not really a joyful kid, but she's really good at pretty much everything she does. And when she focuses on getting A's, not because she loves getting A's, she's just relieved that she didn't get an A minus. So she's just trying to, fight off that feeling of pressure. See, the motivation for perfectionism is not the love of getting things right, it's the fear of getting something wrong. That's what drives perfectionism. So people tend to need to control as many details as they can in their life to avoid that feeling that comes with getting something wrong. If you know a perfectionist, you might think that they like being this way and that they're just too hard on everyone, but the truth is they're really hardest on themselves. And then whatever criticisms you feel you're getting from them is just a little bit of the criticism that they give to themselves. I know another girl, it tends to be girls more than boys, whose room must be completely organized, or she's too anxious to go to sleep. Everything's got to have a space. She has animals that have to be arranged in the right order, and the animals have to be right in their place, or she can't go to sleep. The clothes need to be all put away. The closet is organized by color and function. And she even has gone down to the dry cleaners to get extra plastic bags, so she can have plastic bags over each of her, articles of clothes in the closet. And that way she can, if everything's in order, then she can go to sleep, once she's got everything straightened out. You might think that she just likes it this way, but no, the truth is she never really feels good or okay or joyful. She's too concerned about the past that might not have been right, or the future that might not be right when it's coming. So the extraordinary effort that perfectionists put in on doing good robs them of joy. Joy doesn't come from extraordinary effort. Joy comes from ordinary things. You can be happy, which is circumstantial. If you put in a lot of effort, you can make people happy by putting a lot of effort. But joy comes from having the ability to appreciate the normal, the everyday, the ordinary events in life, and being able to take it in and feel good. And ironically, perfectionism is not the key to self-improvement or success. It actually gets in the way of success because you can't prioritize. Everything's important, and you spend too much time. One woman who spends hours and hours planning their vacation. I mean, it's like a full-time job for her. The hotel has to be right, the airline has to be right, and there's so many options, when you're planning travel, that she spends hours and hours doing. This is supposed to be fun. You're planning your vacation, and her husband, he can't comment on it because if you say anything about it, it just makes her mad. And he said, you're planning our vacation. It's supposed to be fun. It doesn't give you the ability to prioritize and know which things are not worth that much effort and which things should be. So perfectionists are trying to control, but what are they trying to control? They're trying to control a feeling that they don't want to feel. So what's driving that? What is that? It's the fear of getting something wrong. If I get something wrong, what am I going to feel? I'm going to feel bad. And what's that bad feeling? It's not really guilt. You think it's guilt. Oh, there was a better deal over here I should have gotten, so I feel guilty. But no, it's worse than that. It's actually shame. It's guilt. It's feeling bad for having done something wrong. Shame is feeling bad for being something wrong. Right? So it's more personal than that. So it's not that I'm afraid I'm going to get it wrong and then that'll make me feel bad. I'm afraid I'm going to get it wrong and everybody's going to see that I'm the kind of person that gets it wrong. It's more personal. Shame is, I feel bad about me. Guilt is feeling bad about what you do. Shame is feeling bad about who you are. Much more pernicious, much more difficult emotion, and something we all really don't want to feel. It's a lot easier to talk about your guilt than your shame, because you can say I'm sorry for what I did wrong, but you can't say I'm sorry for who I am. That's harder. So that's that very difficult inner emotion that drives this fear of getting something wrong, because I don't want to feel that I am bad. Perfectionism is an attempt to hide that fear that you're either not enough or too much. And shame goes either that way. I'm either too much for people or I'm not enough for people. Not enough or too much are two sides of the same coin. So it's never ending, because as soon as you have avoided failure on one thing, then there's something else to avoid. It never stops. You get up every day with how many things can I not, can I keep from going bad today? Now, if you are a perfectionist, then I don't have to tell you that perfectionism leads to procrastination, because it makes sense, right? If I'm afraid of getting something wrong, well, you're going to put off things as long as you can because you don't want to do something and then potentially get it wrong. Starting and completing things can become quite difficult for someone who's a perfectionist. What if you miss something or you don't think of everything? And it isn't, I'll say again, because you just like getting things right. You might tell yourself that. Well, I just like doing it right. I like a job well done. Actually, doing things right is a sign of good mental health. You should take pride in the things you do. You should like doing things well. But it's when it's to the exclusion of your own feelings that it creates a problem. I have to get it right, not just because you like getting it right, because you fear what people will think if you get it wrong. And so that fear of what people will think makes it impossible for you to evaluate it. How do you know when it's good enough? How do you know? It's a feeling you get. Yeah, that's good enough. We have a concept in raising children in child psychology we call good enough parenting. The parent that's a really good parent gets that. It's good enough. If you have to get it right, perfectly right, that's not good for kids. What's good for kids is for you to say that's good enough. Good enough parenting. You want kids to be good, but you don't want them to be perfect because nobody can be perfect. That is more terrorizing that things have to be perfect. And the problem is that perfectionism is a kind of effort to earn love. So the kids that's a perfectionist, and we don't work with them very often because parents don't bring those kids in. They're all out there just getting everything perfect. But when we do see it, we try to get to the core of what's motivating the kids. So kids either act perfect or they act out. Kids, they act out, they act bad. Like if you have a perfect kid, then you're also going to have one that acts out because perfect's already taken, right? So I'm going to do the other thing. And also, if you have an older kid who acts out, then you get a perfectionist that follows behind because, okay, that's taken, the one who's acting out, so I'm going to be the perfect one. They're motivated by the same thing, really. It's trying to earn love. I'm going to be perfect, and if I'm perfect enough, then I'm going to get love. We can't earn love. You can earn attention, you can earn recognition, you can earn achievements, the things you can earn by your effort, but you can't earn love. Love is for who you are. It's not for what you do. I appreciate you for what you do, but I love you for who you are. So they confuse that. They're thinking, well, I'm perfect enough, I'll get the love that I don't feel. So whenever a kid is extremely terrorized by perfectionism or acting out a lot, I know that really what they're doing, they're acting out for attention because they're substituting attention for love. It's not a kid who needs attention. No, that's a kid who needs love. You think, oh, they need more attention. No, that's not quite right. They're substituting attention for love. That's a kid who doesn't feel loved. because love is for who you are, not for what you do. And some of us grew up and we still are doing that. We still think that if I act a certain way, then I will get the attention, and the attention then will satisfy my need for love. It doesn't. It doesn't. Love is for who you are. So perfectionism is a form of psychological legalism, we'll put it that way. This is what the author of James says: speak and act as those who are going to be judged by the law that gives freedom, because judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful. Mercy triumphs over judgment. That's in James 2. Mercy triumphs over judgment. Now, how's that work? When he says, speak and act as those who are going to be judged by the law that gives freedom, he's talking about the gospel, the law that gives freedom. The Jewish law was, you follow the rules, you act by the rules, and that's a form of judgment. People who are too rule bound miss the mercy part. The thing about Christianity that's really great is that you don't get into heaven based on being perfect. Because if you did, we'd not be there. You guys would have given up long ago. No, you get there based on mercy, grace. It's God's love for you, for who you are, not because you did it right. Not because you speak right, you act right, you do the right things, you're good enough to get into heaven. Now, I know a lot of you probably still fear that. I wonder if I'm good enough to get into heaven when I get there. What's Peter going to say?
That's why purgatory exists.
Is it? Yeah, make up for it. Yeah. Yeah, it's a thing we terrorize ourselves with. But if you really read what the New Testament says, it's no, you get in heaven by grace. That's how Christianity works. We feel accepted. And once you experience that grace, which is unconditional, it's unmerited favor, you don't deserve it, but you get it. And once you get it, it's the thing that heals us. And actually, I think that it's psychologically the thing that heals shame is grace. It's the experience of grace. That's what heals it. It's that love that you're longing for that you don't feel, and then you're acting out or acting perfect to try to get it by acting perfect, and that doesn't work. It's when you actually feel accepted for who you are that begins to heal that inner feeling, that fear that you're not enough. I'm going to give you an example of that in just a minute. But I think this works so well for humanity, and I think it's the reason Christianity is the dominant religion. Psychologically, it's the reason Christianity is the dominant religion on the planet, because people know this. They know they can't be good enough to earn love. Somehow they know they try, but they can't. And then when you experience this feeling of grace that Christianity talks about, it's like, oh, I feel so relieved, I get to be a part of the club, and it's not because I've earned it, it's because God loves me. God loves me? Me? Yeah, loves you. And that's it's so attractive as opposed to other religions where you got to earn it. You got to earn your way up to the place where you're supposed to be.
Can I ask a quote?
Please.
Perfectionism can be compartmentalized.
It
You
can.
can be a perfectionist about some things and then the heck with other things.
You
So,
can.
I mean, it doesn't have to be an all-pervasive thing in a personality, right?
It does not have to be an all-pervasive thing. That's true. So there's only one area where you're trying to earn love in your life. So that's better. It's better. The other, you give yourself a break, in other areas. And it also could be that if you're a perfectionist, you've decided I'm only going to try in this one area, and I can't fail if I don't try. So all the other areas, I don't care because I've just zeroed in on this one area where I think I can earn love. And it's like one of my sons who, if he likes a class, he'll try. If he doesn't like, he won't try. I mean, he can't fail because he didn't try. I can't fail. I don't care, he'll say. It's a disguise for the same thing. So it could be that too. It depends on the kid, depends on the person. But yeah, I think it'd be better if you were not a perfectionist in every area of your life. You can give yourself a break. So this concept of mercy, let me finish my thought on that too. I think it's what makes Christianity attractive, this idea that you can be accepted for who you are. But mercy applies to yourself as well as to other people. Some of us don't have that feeling of mercy for ourselves, that feeling of grace acceptance, that you're okay for who you are.
And you can't give it to anyone else until you've given it to yourself.
Makes it pretty hard.
Very real way.
Makes it pretty hard, yeah. If you haven't experienced it, how can you give it to someone else, right? And there are people, and I'm sure you know people who are, they mean well, but they're just hard on themselves. They can't stop being hard on themselves because they haven't had that experience. You know, they haven't felt just really loved for who they are. That feeling of grace, of love for who you are.
And we're talking about surrender
Mhm.
in the first class.
Right.
And that's something that it's like you can't try hard to try hard. You have to let go.
Right. Right. You know people who are trying hard to try hard. It's right. The dialectic on power that we've been talking about is on one end there's control, on the other end there's inspiration and authority, and on this end you've got submission, and this end you've got surrender. You submit to people, but you surrender to God. Right. So if I'm a person who lives with a sense of surrender, of grace, I've experienced grace, so I surrender to that. So I can give up my false self, give up my ego, because I live with this feeling of surrender. Submission is a power struggle over here, where you submit to people, they demand that you follow. And we know that if you're not experiencing this grace and surrender, then all of us are vulnerable to these power struggles over here of submission, all of us. You know, we talked about the psychological studies where after World War II, we wanted to find out if Americans would just follow authority figures, even to the point of killing someone, and found out, yeah, we would. You know, it's really scary. The Stanford prison experiment, and we talked about that, you know, where Zimbardo put a bunch of normal college kids, Stanford college kids, in a study, randomly assigned them to guards or prisoners, and he was going to do this prison experiment. Let's see what kids do if you're a guard, you're a prisoner. And it was supposed to go 2 weeks. They had to stop it after 6 days because they were so abusive. The guards were so abusive to the students. Well, that's scary. So that's what we do. Well, years later, Zimbardo wrote another book explaining why. Why did they do that? Well, because Zimbardo was telling them to do that. You know, that was the experiment. He was saying, you must act this way. You're a guard, you must act. So they don't naturally do that, but they will follow a leader who tells them to do that. Right. So the kids figured, and one of the guard kids was too easy on one of the prisoners. And Zimbardo said, told one of the other guards to tell him to do his job better. Right. So later he kind of confessed why were the kids so abusive? Well, he told them to act that way. And it was all almost between the lines, it was subtle. He subtly got them to act mean. So you will, all of us will, think about that. You're very vulnerable if you don't live with this very powerful feeling of grace and self-acceptance and love and surrender to God. If you don't live with that, then, which none of us do every day, right? Then you're vulnerable to falling into these power struggles, where someone coming along and telling you, well, this is how it's going to be. This is how I know how it's going to be. You should follow the rules. And like sheep, we do, because we all have fears, right? So anyway, back to perfectionism. Yeah, Jesus said, go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have come to call the righteous, not the sinners. Jesus clearly was not interested in perfectionism. You know, he came to call sinners. He wanted us to feel accepted. He wanted us to live with this feeling of surrender, not be in these constant power struggles with ourselves and other people for control, and to live perfectly. He was interested in compassion and mercy and grace. And that's kind of that's what we do in therapy, is we get people to have grace for themselves. People come in, you're hardest on yourself, and they feel ashamed and bad. I haven't lived a perfect life. I've done these things wrong. I'm a bad person. And what we try to do is understand your life. Well, why did you act that way? What happened? What was your childhood like? What were the things in your life that, who was the Zimbardo of your life telling you to be this way? You know, because someone did, you know, someone was telling you how to be and you went along with it. And once people figure that out, they go, yeah, it makes sense that I would act that way. It makes sense I would do those things. Given everything that happened to me, of course I acted that way. And then you have the chance to have mercy for yourself. You say, oh, well, maybe I'm not a bad person. You know, I just had a bad Zimbardo in my life, you know, telling me to do things the wrong way or abusing me or, you know, hurting me. And now I see that, I get the picture of why I, so that self-acceptance is what heals that feeling of shame, where we can then surrender the need to get right, need to be perfect, or the need to act out if you chose that path. Because you didn't accept yourself. People come to therapy and they think we're gonna blame everything on your mother. And it's not your fault. Well, it's not quite right. If you come to therapy, we will talk about your mom, but it's just to understand what happened to you so you can take responsibility for it. Not so we can blame her. Like let's understand what happened. And now you take responsibility for changing your life. So we might say it's not your fault you are the way you are, somebody else's fault you're that way, but it's your fault if you stay that way.
Yeah.
You gotta figure it out. How'd you get this way? Who made you this way? Who did this to you? And once you figure that out, do you want to keep doing that? Want to do something different? Let's take responsibility for our lives, and to really change, you have to have mercy for yourself. You gotta accept yourself. Oh, that's why I did. That's why I married that guy. That's why I did this. And I see it now, and that compassion for yourself moves you in the direction of surrender. Now you can live with a feeling of acceptance that allows you to make better choices. So let me give you an example. Talk about Ian. I've threatened to talk about him several times, so I'm gonna follow through for Ian. Very talented and successful businessman, well respected in his job, leader in his church, happily married with 2 kids, looks perfect. Everything looks perfect in Ian's life. But as you know, everything is not always as it appears to be, right? So he came for therapy because he was plagued with disturbing thoughts that nobody knew about. He was grateful for his life in many ways. His wife, he loved her, his kids, he felt good about having them, and he's very successful in his jobs. But at times he had passive thoughts of suicide. And passive thoughts are that the world would be better if I'm just not here. You don't really think about killing yourself. You just think it would just be better if I wasn't here. His life, as we've discussed now, was exhausting. Being a perfectionist is exhausting. And there are times when he just thinks, I just would rather not be here. It's just too hard. But no one knew that by looking at him. He said to me, I was driving home from work a few weeks ago, and when it happened for the first time, and I said, well, tell me about that. He said, well, I had just landed a very large project at work. A lot of people depend on me to bring in projects like this. So I was relieved to get the work, but not looking forward to all it was going to take to get it done. He said, and then I got the call from my wife about William. She had taken him, our oldest son, in to the neurologist for testing and found out that his EEG was abnormal. The neurologist thinks he might be epileptic. Epileptic. Just saying the word makes me feel like someone just punched me in the stomach. I said, well, you must have been stunned. He said, you can say that again. And then it happened. I said, what? He said, that bad thought. And I said, what was the thought? And he said, that maybe it would be better if I just drove right off the road. I said, off the road? He goes, yeah, right off the road and into oncoming traffic. Can you believe it? Me, of all people, thinking it would be better if I just wasn't around anymore. I said, so you wished you were dead? He said, exactly. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but that's when I started having thoughts of just not being here. I don't think I'd ever do it, but I can't stop the thoughts from coming into my head anyway. It's actually a fairly common thought where people have this feeling of driving into oncoming traffic, the exhaustion of my life would stop if I did that. So these passive thoughts of suicide is a way of the unconscious dealing with the overwhelming burden of life. It's not the desire to die, it's a desire to get relief from feelings. Unfortunately, it's a strategy you can only do once if you do it. So it's a permanent fix to a temporary problem. So most people don't do it because it's not really what they want. They just want the relief, right? I want my life to stop being so exhausting. So he wasn't actually suicidal, he was overwhelmed. He was raised in a strict family where children were seen but not heard. And to avoid his parents' disapproval, he was the perfect son. That's what he did. They would be proud of him and he would stay out of trouble. Doing good things meant he was a good boy. Doing bad things meant that he wasn't a good boy. So that's why we don't tell parents to say that anymore. Don't tell your son he's a good boy. You say that was a well done thing you did, because you don't want them to start thinking, well, that's how, there's the only way I can be a good person is by doing good things. You know, they make that connection in their head. When perfectionism becomes the basis of your self-worth, it's exhausting. He was trying to earn love, right? That's what he grew up doing, and he was very successful. Good behavior is a desirable thing. I want all my kids to be good. I tell them that. I want you to do that well and you know, do your homework. And I don't care if you don't like the teacher. I want you to do your homework anyway. I want, you know, my kids to do well. But when it's to the only way that they can feel love, it's a problem. You know, if they think, well, he won't love me if I don't do well. In a power struggle with one of my kids now, he's threatening to not go to college. He wants to be an actor, right? So unfortunately, he's got an agent. It doesn't help me. And so I don't fight with him over that, you know, because if I fight saying you're going to college no matter what, you know, what do you think he's going to do?
He's not.
Yeah, you got that right. So it's like, okay, it's your life, you know, and then he has applied to 3, so I'm good with that, you know. And you can't make it his worth conditional. If you make his worth conditional, you're going to get in trouble. He's going to act out. He's going to push back. Now we got a submission control power struggle instead of, well, let's see what God does. Let's surrender to the path forward. And my education helped me, you know. Your dad has a PhD. You know, yeah, I know. Well, that's part of why he's saying it, you know. So you get what I'm saying. But for Ian, that wasn't an option. Everything was already spelled out for him. He knew what he was supposed to do, and he felt like he had to earn love, which is an impossible task. You can't earn it. It's given. It's an experience of acceptance and grace. And so his suicidal thoughts were really just the result of feeling overwhelmed by perfectionism. If everything was perfect, he was a good person, and if it wasn't, then he was a bad person. That's not how life works. Bad things happen to good people. And Ian loved his son, and he was crushed by this diagnosis. But the real reason Ian was upset wasn't because his son might be epileptic. It was because if his son was flawed, it meant he was flawed. Right? So that's why he was most upset. That's why he needed his son to be perfect, you know, because if his son wasn't, then he wasn't perfect, and now he's flawed. And then the shame comes up. Then I'm a bad person. Not only am I a bad father, I'm a bad person. And so that was really his battle. When bad things happened to him or to his family, there was a flaw and exposed his flawedness. So his perfectionism made him desperately want to control things that cannot be controlled. Jesus did not encourage us to be controlling people. He said, what good would it be for a man if he gains the whole world yet forfeits his soul? Right? What good is that? What's the point? What do you really? You're going to get everything, earn everything, do everything, and not live with that sense of grace, a sense of soul, a sense of being loved for who you are. So it wasn't easy, but for Ian, we changed our tactic in his life. He, of course, came in, as you can imagine, the first several sessions, he was sharing all his accomplishments. And this is what I do, and I can't believe it. And I've got all this stuff, and why do I feel so bad? I've done this, I've done that, and Forbes this or whatever. Instead of talking about his accomplishments, we began to talk about his failures, what he perceived to be his failures. And contrary to what he believed, he didn't need me to be proud of him for his performance. He needed to feel accepted by me when he failed. It was just the opposite. He didn't know that. He didn't have a picture of that. So painfully and vulnerably started to share his weaknesses and things that didn't go right, the things he never shared with anybody else. You know? And I didn't do this right, and this failed, and that didn't work out for me, and this project failed. And what he's experienced with me, paradoxically, was the relief that comes from being honest.
Yeah.
You know, he was just being honest. How relieving it is to have an honest conversation. And many times he would say, well, what's the point of that? You know, we're just talking about my feelings, you know, what's the point of that? Because we're not accomplishing anything, right? I mean, we can't check a box, you know, I can't measure it, right? There's a sense of connection, and for him, really, it was the relief of being honest. Then there was that relief that he never got. Because he always, was being perfect everywhere. And so it was exhausting.
You're reminding me, there was something Anderson Cooper said in passing in some interview the last couple of days. He says, he was talking to somebody about something, and he says, are you ever tempted like me to say or do something like, say something on the air that completely destroyed my career all in one shot? And I was like, what a weird comment to make.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's that suicidal.
Yeah.
Do you have a moment of suicidal ideation where you think, why don't I just blow it all up right
Yeah,
now?
yeah. That's a version of driving into oncoming traffic.
Yeah, it's a version of driving into oncoming traffic. It reminded me of that. I have no idea what I
Real
was talking
interesting
about.
comment.
Huh?
Real interesting
Yeah,
comment.
it's a very
Such a
interesting
thoughtful
comment.
person, and you know what, his brother committed suicide.
It does seem to be a little tightly wound, doesn't it? A little bit. He looks
I don't
perfect.
watch enough of them.
He looks perfect.
The book that he wrote with
Yeah,
his
he's
mother
clearly
is so
somebody
beautiful.
Is it? I imagine.
Have you heard about?
No.
When she was in her 90s, he started an email conversation with her, and I think the name of the book is Nothing Left Unsaid. He didn't want there to be anything left unsaid between the two of them, and talk about learning how to connect.
Right.
It's a beautiful book to read.
I would love to read that. And it doesn't surprise me about him too. Yeah.
Also, I was just listening somewhere, I cannot remember where, somebody's having a beautiful life because I think he's in this case, he's very vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's opposite of what you were talking
Yeah.
about, and that putting this facade,
Yeah.
everything is perfect.
Right.
That person was so vulnerable that laughed at himself, made lots of mistakes, and lived life so fully, and he, and everybody enjoyed him.
Right.
And for who he was, very honest, I guess.
Right. But he was vulnerable and honest. So that's that life of surrender, where I'm willing to be vulnerable. You can't be vulnerable if you're a perfectionist. That's it. He gets in the way. He messes things. It's messy. Vulnerability is messy. But you're right. That's that relief that comes from vulnerability. But I also, I say this often, you have to, if you're going to live a life of surrender and vulnerability, choose your confidence wisely. Because there's certain people if you're vulnerable with,
Very much.
you will get hurt.
It's a suicidal impulse.
Yeah, at times. You were vulnerable with that guy. What were you thinking? Just drive into oncoming traffic. Yes, choose your confidence wisely, because there are people who are threatened by vulnerability. So then they punish it. They hate it. They don't like it. So it's a better way to live when you surround yourself with people like in this room. Let's start here. Be vulnerable with these people first, and then test it out carefully on others. So Ian's gotten better. He doesn't have the suicidal thoughts anymore, and he doesn't measure his worth solely on his accomplishments. He also has a good feeling now in the increasing number of just honest conversations he has, particularly with other guys, because he just never did that before. The guys were to be competed against, and he actually learned, well, no, actually you can be vulnerable with guys, and there's something that happens there that feels good. It's relieving. It's honest. And so he finds this a more satisfying way to live. That's perfectionism in Ian. And I want to shift gears just a little because I want to talk about power struggles on a more global level. I'll end on this. I just have about 15 more minutes. So I'm concerned about power struggles in our world today. This notion of the only way to be powerful is to control versus, wait a minute, there's a way of inspiring. That you can make people do what you want, or you can help them want to do what you want. So how do you want to live? I want to make people do what I want, or I want them to want to do what I want. This is more life-giving. This is more powerful. The power then spreads, because once they want to do it, I don't have to make them do anything anymore. It just multiplies, right? They're living that way because they want to live that way. So this is inspiration. This is domination. Both are powerful and both are needed at times. Now we had to shoot the balloon down. I mean, what are you going to do? Thank God somebody had a gun, and they shot that thing down. So that's over here. The power of control is necessary at times. You guys know there was a balloon, the Chinese had, yeah, right? Everybody knows about that. We're all very, very upset about that. You know, there's a balloon in our airspace, you know, there's no guns on it, but shouldn't be there.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. So we shot it down and we all feel better. Yeah, right. So that's over here. So it's necessary at times. But the problem is when this is the only form of power, where we have to control and dominate, we don't know how to do this. That's the problem. That's the problem. And that's why we dialogue back and forth. When should we do this? When do we not do this? You know, we need to have power as a context. When do I need to be inspirational? When do I need to take control of the situation? And I think we don't know, and particularly in politically, we don't know. We're very confused. And I was disturbed. I'm sure you all heard this incident where Tyree Nichols was beaten to death by the police. I tried to watch the videos, but it was so disturbing. It's so disturbing when the police do it. It's when it's so disturbing. I mean, you know, gangsters are out there killing each other. That's most of the murders are gangsters killing each other. But when you actually have a video of police doing it, you think, oh, it's so gone wrong. You know, that we think that's the way we're going to solve problems. There were a special unit that were designed to fight high crime and high crime areas. And so they were probably doing this all the time, you know, to bad guys, right? Well, Tyree wasn't a bad guy. He was just trying to get home. And they drug him out of his car and started beating him. He tried to run away and then they beat him to death. And they're all charged with murder. I mean, that's murder. They're going to go away. They've all been fired, charged with murder. And I was disturbed, and I'm thinking about it, and like, really, is this out of control? This need to control, is it out of control? There's a time for it, but do we know when there isn't a time for it? Why isn't it one of those guys can say, hey, this is too much? You know, wait a minute. Nobody thought that?
When you get into the us versus them thing, there's got to be something bigger than us and them.
Right.
I mean, and it's not about me inspiring somebody to do what I want. It's a bigger calling. It's not personal. It's about a larger good.
For in those moments, they make it impersonal. It wasn't a person, right? It wasn't a
We
person.
dehumanized it.
Yeah, right. We do. That's what we do. Yes.
My thought on that incident was that these are police in a moment of high stress
Yes.
and tension. And my thought was like, was it such an adrenaline rush that they couldn't think clearly anymore once they caught him? You know, that the adrenaline just released all this aggression that they were no longer sane in their action.
I hope that's true. That's a kind way of looking at it, that they were caught up in adrenaline rush, like we were talking about 2 weeks ago, where the amygdala hijacks the prefrontal cortex, or the lizard brain takes over. I'm not even thinking anymore, you know. And for some strange reason, they thought they were fighting for their lives. You know, no, you weren't. The guy was in handcuffs.
Well, and the reality too is there's such an anti-police sentiment.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to what kind of an impact does that have on a person?
Yeah.
Who's in that kind of a position. It's not to excuse things.
I know.
But it's real.
We're trying to understand. Right. We're trying to understand.
The kind of people who want to be a policeman, to me, that's a horrible job. It's there's an attraction there, and I'm not condoning anything, and I'm not saying negative things about the police. It sounds like I am. But
Do your best.
I just want to be a policeman,
Do your best.
you know.
Yeah,
with
you're right.
weapons.
Well, what you're saying here is right. There's so much negative sentiment about them, then only a certain kind of person would even dare to do it, right? So you're right. So
They
there's
see control,
there's
they
a
see-
selection process thing
Right.
going on here too, right?
We can't make assumptions.
No, I have heard that the selection process is different now. In some cases, that they've had to reduce standards because they
Right.
were
Having
losing
difficulty.
Yeah,
employees
yeah.
and they couldn't get hired.
Correct.
So they had to
Reduce the
reduce
standard.
our standards.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and again, not to excuse anybody for horrific
But this is-
actions.
it-
But we're not, if we are going to think, who are the police? The
Mhm.
police of this group, obviously, are not the idealized ones that we think we've had in the
It's all
past.
we can get to take the job, nobody else will take the
Right.
job.
We've set that up.
We
Yes.
lowered the standards that you don't need a college degree to be a cop in this country, you do in other countries.
That's right.
We're just trying to get people to do that job.
We need to be vulnerable in assessing what's going on and taking a look at real hard stuff.
It would be a tough job, right?
It would be a terrible job.
To try to make those, we work with police officers in our counseling center and they don't want anybody to know what they do, They want to keep it confidential. And thank God they're willing to come for therapy, so we can hopefully make an impact before these things.
But
Just
one of
like
the
what you
things-
said about PTSD with soldiers
Exactly.
and really appreciating people who put their lives on the line to
Exactly.
protect our freedom.
And the job environment is brutal, not just outside, but in the police station. It's tough.
I think also, though, this kind of brutality has been going on for many years,
Mhm.
and nobody knew about it. Now they have these cameras that show
Yeah,
everything. It's all exposed.
which I think is a
I'm
good
not
thing.
saying anything about whether I'm, thinking the police is a good or bad thing. I think the police are doing incredible work, and I'm
Yes.
amazed at
Yes.
what, to become a police, and the courage,
Yeah.
but at the same time, we have to look at the facts and the idea of
And
what's happening.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think the cameras is a good thing because now it's out. And
That-
they released these videos right away, which they haven't been doing. They've been holding in the fight to get them. Right away, they put it, we're all horrified. It's like, good. Maybe that will help. Yeah, accountability, yeah.
So I'm thinking about, while I agree that of course it's never okay to brutalize someone, I wonder what went in their mind, a little bit of what you were saying. Like, what was their either thinking or their perception of what was happening for them to act that way? I wonder if, what is that they saw that no one else sees, that are not trained, and like, what is their excuse, or whether they follow the orders of the person that was saying, you do this or else. And it's like, I don't know, like they're wrong if they do, wrong if they don't, almost,
These are the questions I hope someone's looking into, someone would need to hopefully interview these specific guys so we can learn from this, right? But yes, I mean, the mayor of it was Memphis, right?
Right.
I'm going back, a press release when the unit first got started, it was about a year and a half old. He was praising the unit because they were responsible for just the first 4 months of this unit's existence. 566 arrests, 390 of them were felony arrests. They seized over $100,000 of cash, 270 vehicles, 253 weapons. That was in the first 4 months. So they were saying, good job, you guys. Now, no one was really looking into how they got all that stuff, but they were fighting high crime in a high crime area and probably, brutally doing so. Now we probably think, right? So you're right. We were saying, there's Zimbardo was saying, good job. Good job. Thanks for fighting all the bad guys. And yet we were not self-reflective on the use of power. And now I think we're going to have to, when this kind of thing happens, we have to reflect. Someone's got to be self-reflective in these moments. If policemen are out in society, this isn't just a war zone. We're out in society where unsuspecting people driving home can be brutalized.
So, it ties into your reference to the Stanford study. All of us are subject to behavior with the law.
Right.
The question that I think maybe is more interesting then is to say, okay, well, then we want to be the exception. So let's go talk to the people who are the exceptions and ask them, how did you end up being an exception? If there is a situation where one person stands out and says, wait, stop, this is wrong, don't do that. Go talk to them and say, how did you get there?
I think that would be a great question to ask, because remember in the Milgram studies, it was only 66% of Americans who would shock someone to death. So there's 33% out there that didn't.
Those are the ones that you want to study.
Yeah, who are those people? Who are the people who said no? Who said
Because I
what?
would think, you know, but I could be completely wrong, but I would think historically it's been true that in our faith, in our desire to be consistent with the teachings of Jesus, that we have built into the church, into our faith, into our lives, we have built mechanisms to stand up against a majority rule that is wrong.
Yeah.
We have the ability to know the difference between right. We have a higher power to access, to give us the strength to do that. We don't do it very often. And we don't teach it very often. We don't spend too much time in church talking about, hey, you know, in your day-to-day life, how are you doing? And
Right.
your ability to resist the mob temptation.
Right, in the day-to-day life. Yeah, you're right. We talk about these examples out there, but what about your life this week?
Yeah,
When have you stood up for righteousness? You know,
yeah.
when have you spoken?
But I don't know if that's the key either. That's why I'm saying, talking to that 33%, you know, it's like, was it because of your faith that you did that, or was it some other reason?
That's a good question. Now,
So I was kind of reflecting on the Bible and Jesus. And somehow 10 Commandments came up for me. So you have the 10 Commandments, you have the laws. And in the Jewish tradition, you break a law, there's a consequence, an eye for an eye, whatever, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's basically judgmental, and then you go, that's it. There's nothing in between, there's no grace, I guess.
Right.
But I think what I love about, and I wish I could read the Bible more often so I know what the hell I'm talking about, but anyway.
it's a good book.
So-
You should-
It's the best seller.
It's a bestseller. Every year.
It's so deep, though. So anyway, what I wanted to say is, Jesus really is introducing, he knows all the laws.
Yeah.
And now he's gone deeper.
Yeah, that's right.
And now he's thinking for himself. He's not thinking, these are the laws I'm gonna follow no matter what. He's thinking, I know the laws, but he broke them from a place of compassion,
Right.
a place of seeing the person.
Right.
He was really advocating for people that nobody wanted, they were excluded, they were like the garbage of society or whatever, and that's where he went into.
Yep.
And I think that's the part we probably need to look at more. Whether I'm looking at the police or I'm looking at
Yeah.
whatever that I find is triggering me, is to go beyond that, to say, I know these are my laws, but now what do I do as a human being looking at these human beings? We're even.
Yeah.
And that's the struggle for me, I think, right
Well,
now.
for all people, you know, psychologists have studied this. We've got people who study moral development and what makes a moral person. And they've studied what they consider to be the highest, most ethically moral people in all of history, like Mother Teresa, Jesus, Gandhi. You know, look at their lives, look at the exceptions, and what can we learn from them? And what we find is that people hopefully develop. You start off kind of rule-based, and a good person follows the rules, and then the really more advanced people know the rules, but they don't live by the rules. And then you think, well, what don't you think doesn't that mean they're selfish if they're not going to live by the rules? But what we find is that the most morally developed people know the rules, break the rules, don't live by the rules, but they are altruistic. They love other people. They live for other people. They surrender. They live lives of surrender. I'm surrendering something bigger than me. I know what the rules are, but I don't have to follow them because I follow love. You know, I'm gonna be in the moment, know right from wrong, choose right from wrong in the moment, not because of the rules, even though I know them, because I know right from wrong. And I loved when my oldest son was taking karate, they would have a little lecture. It's very Buddhist, you know, karate dojos are very Buddhist. And I love that. And he'd sit all the little kids in a circle, those 8-year-old kids, and they would say this, you only use karate here. You don't use it out there. use it here. And if you get in a situation at school, look in your heart, you know the right thing. That's what he tells these little 8-year-olds. Look in your heart, you know the right thing to do. I thought, well, do they?
That's a powerful
Yeah.
thing to live up to, somebody saying that.
Well, I was thinking, do you have an 8-year-old kid? You know, I mean, you're telling them that, but really?
Yeah.
But you know what? I think it's true. We're all made in the image of God.
To the expectations you have.
That's right. He was expecting them all to be moral people. He was saying, I know you're moral people. Look in your heart. You know the right thing to do. Do it. He wasn't telling them what to do. He was saying, look in your heart. And we are all made in the image of God. Every single one of us. Made in the, I don't care if you're Christian or not. You're in the image of God. You know right from wrong.
It's very easy to, point the finger and see the evil when you have a bunch of police officers, obviously killing this man. But what are we doing daily? If you go on next door in our neighborhood,
Yeah,
I mean,
Yeah.
the political divisiveness, this person is with this camp, this is an unvaxxed. I mean, it's just the hate
Yeah.
and the vitriol.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, this is hanging
It's
people.
real.
You can, the anger there.
Yeah, you're right.
It's enough to lynch, people
You're right.
who are on the opposite camp.
You're absolutely right. And that's why we need to talk about it. And we need to ask ourselves this week, when did I look in my heart and know the difference between right and wrong? This isn't just for the people in Memphis, this is for us,
Yeah.
and yeah, I hate that app, so I'm always, every day getting something terrible.
But
I can't take it off my phone though. I have to.
for me, the significance of what when Jesus said, when Paul says for freedom, Christ has set you free.
Right.
What freedom for what? And in my mind, that is the freedom to do what's right. It's the freedom to follow the teachings of Jesus, no matter what situation you're in.
You choose, right. You choose the good.
It's freedom to go against the mob.
Yeah.
Freedom to go against the mob. It's free. You can actually make up your own mind.
Right.
You really can.
You're free to choose. And I think the dojo master guy was right. If you look inside your heart, you'll know. You'll know. But it takes courage to do that, to really look inside your heart.
It takes freedom.
We've been given that. Let me close with one example. I've told you this story before. I'm going to do the abbreviated version. As most of you know, my books are in Portuguese in Brazil, and so I traveled to Brazil to book tours. And the last time I was there, I wanted to meet a man named Anderson Saw. Somebody remember this story? I tell you this story. They did a special on him. Rio de Janeiro, beautiful city, but right outside of Rio de Janeiro is the favela. It's a huge slum, one of the largest slums in the world, really. And it is so bad that the police won't go there. The police can't go there because they just build shanties on shanties and there are no roads. The cars can't get in there because they're just, it's so poor. They self-made everything in there and huge drug trafficking. It's so sad, but the drug lords who live there have figured out that the rich people will come to the edge of the favela and buy their drugs and then go home. And so that's how they make money in the favela, is through drug trafficking. Well, Anderson Saw's brother was killed in a police raid, and his brother didn't have anything to do with the drug trafficking. He was just there. And it's kind of a Memphis thing where the police came in and just shot everybody. They're going to clean it up. So they went in and his brother was there. So Anderson was also growing up thinking he was going to get involved in the drug trade because it was the only option open to anyone who wanted any kind of power there. But when that happened, it really changed him, because there was wars between the drug lords and the police all the time. They were killing each other all the time, and then the drug lords would kill police when they saw them. And he said to himself, well, I just can't keep doing that. I want to do something, but I don't want to keep doing that. He wanted to fight back, but in a different way. And so what he did was he got involved with this group called Grupo Afro Reggae. And what they do is they teach kids, teenagers, to play drums and dance. And it's so cool. If you see their performance, it's really pretty cool, this street dance thing. But the only way you can get in the club is if you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't use drugs. That's it. You don't do those things, you could be in our club. And it became so contagious, I mean, so exciting. They now house over 2,000 kids in his band there. And they do these street performances, and somebody did a special on it. So I saw the special, so I wanted to meet Anderson Saw. So he's got now he calls it a cultural center in the favela, right? So when I'm there and I have a guide who shows up at my hotel in Rio de Janeiro, Wagner's name, Wagner Medeiros, I don't know the name. He shows up and he goes, great, I want to meet this guy Anderson Saw. He goes, what? Yeah, Anderson. He looked him up and he says, are you sure? Because this is, you know what the favela is, right? But yeah, I've heard about it, but I want to meet this guy Anderson Saw. He says, I'm not so sure you want to meet this guy because we have to go there. And I said, yeah, I want to meet him. And so he set it up, and Anderson came to the edge of the favela to meet us because cars can't get in there, right? So we had to park our town car at a gas station. And so Wagner takes his tie and coat off, and so does the driver, because you don't want to go in looking like you've got money, right? And so we walk into the, have I told you the story before? No?
No.
All right. So we have to walk into the favela. We leave the gas station, we're walking in, and there are these armed guards that we have to pass with machine guns that as we're coming up, Anderson's with us now, and as we're going into the favela, that you can see the look on their face, they look at me, I don't belong there. And they look, even Wagner didn't look like he belonged there. And then they recognize Anderson and they go, oh, okay. Come on, so Anderson can pass, right? They knew him, they knew what he was doing. And he's really in competition with the drug lords because he's there to steal their brothers and sisters and children away from the drug trafficking to get them into his program, right? So they're really fighting for the same kids, and the drug lords love him. They love him because they don't want their children and their brothers and sisters to go into their trade. They really don't. Now they'll get other kids to go in, but they don't want their brother and their child in the drug trade. And so he has so much respect. And when we get into the cultural center, there's an ATM machine right there in the cultural center. I said, how is this possible to be here? He says, they respect us here. They respect us here. And I had a couple-hour conversation with him and told me about the dancing and the stuff that they do. And then on the way out, as we're leaving, I asked Wagner, I said, so who do you think was more powerful, the guy with the machine gun or Anderson Saw? And he says, Anderson Saw, clearly. He's the most powerful man I know. And when I was sitting with Anderson, I said, I had to use the translator because he didn't speak English, and I know 8 words in Portuguese, so I had to use the translator. And I said, so how are you this way? I mean, who taught you to be this way? How are you this way? And he rolled up his sleeve and he had a tattoo of the face of Jesus on his arm, and he goes, my man. It's the largest Catholic country in the world, so there's Catholic influence. Now, I think he was influenced by a lot of different kinds of spirituality. Brazil is very open-minded, so they have the natural spirituality there. But I think there's something to that. I think he got something of our conversation, right? He knew there's a way to live that's better. You look inside your heart, you know right from wrong. And I know a more powerful way to fight back against all this, the crime and the violence. He didn't join the police force. That's not what he did. No, he did this. He said, I'm going to live a life of surrender. I'm going to figure out how to inspire people to be better people. I'm going to figure out teach kids to play drums and dance. That's your answer? Yeah, it is. And now he has a trade school there where he's teaching them trade skills, and especially women, because they can't become drug lords. They got nothing, so he's teaching them trades so they can earn a living and get themselves out of the favela. And they've started the first, actually my publishing company started the first nonprofit in the history of Brazil. That's what they tell us. What their equivalent of a 501c3. They started at, it's been 15 years or so ago now, where they're now getting resources and giving money to developing the skills of these people to lift them out of poverty. Alice.
Sorry, last. So yesterday, a friend of mine and I went from Pasadena downtown to the Gold Line. So we're sitting at the Gold Line in the metro thing. And so I'm facing, like the seats are this way, so we're facing this way. And it was a young man that came in, kind of tough looking and kind of scary. And as we were going, he was standing next to this kind of poster of going to college, whatever. And he took his Sharpie and he started writing letters, like gang, I don't know, for me, it looks like gang letters, and I kept looking at his young man. So I went up to him and I said, so what those, it's very smiley, and I'm like, what do those letters mean? What are you writing? And he just looked at me shocked. It almost like he went from invisibility
Mhm.
to being seen.
Yeah.
It was the strangest thing.
Yeah.
And it took him a while to respond. And then he said, which letters? Because he wrote some different letters here and different letters under the poster's eye, the young man. And he said, well, those letters are where I come from, the city where I come from, or something like that. And I said, what are the lower letters? They were bigger. And he goes, I can't tell you. And I said, is it gang? And he goes, yes. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I'm like, okay, thank you. I see. It's interesting to me though, fascinating actually, was that he himself dehumanized us.
Yeah.
And so it goes both ways.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The reason why they do what they do or whatever is because they're not seen.
right.
And I never really got it until that moment where I could see him literally change his
Yeah.
expression when he was seen.
Right, but
So bizarre.
if we dehumanize, it gives us permission to be violent. But when you humanize, it's much, much harder.
Yeah.
Did you say his last name again?
S.A. Anderson Saw, S.A. Last name. S.A. S is in Sam. Anderson Saw, yeah. You can probably find the video out there on his the work that he's
He's
done
on PBS too, though. They've highlighted him and the dancing that he's done on a couple.
on PBS too. Yeah, yeah. I think that's I saw it somewhere, but maybe on PBS. It was very impressive to see the work. Simple guy, didn't have a PhD in anything. But he is transforming thousands of lives by living this way. So can we. You can choose the way to live. Look inside your heart, you know right from wrong. Ask yourself this week, which do you choose? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Every February.
Alive.